The first thing we want to do is cut our pattern pieces. We have a flower pot rim. We're going to cut 8 of those. We're going to cut those out of the fabric that you want for the flower pot. We're going to do the same thing for the flower pot itself, cut 8 of those. And then we have a background. I'm going to make the background of the same fabric that I'm going to make my bag out of so that it blends into the background. So I have 8 on the left side, 8 on the right side. We'll cut those pieces first. When this bag is done, you'll have 8 exterior pockets. Once we've done that, we'll go ahead and start sewing them together. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, our stitch length of 2 millimeters, and a size 70 sharp needle will give you nice results. I used a good quality polyester thread. Sew that together. We'll do the same thing on this side. Align the edges, find our 1/4 inch seam allowance, and sew them. Once that's done, it's going to look like this. And then we're going to want to go ahead and press these seam allowances open. And the first thing I like to do is get in there with my finger and just finger press it, just to get a sense of what I want them to do. Once I've done that, I'm going to use my iron and press them into place. There's a difference between pressing and ironing. Pressing is simply pressing into the fabric so it doesn't distort. Ironing is pushing along it, and it can sometimes distort. Now when you're using bias, sometimes a little spritz of starch will help you. It'll keep things from distorting even further. Real stable as we work our way along. Once that's in place, this device here is called a clapper. It's made of wood, in this case it's oak, and what it does is I can put some pressure on that seam and set it there for just about 10-15 seconds. It'll help remove some of the moisture. It'll also help really set the stitch so I don't have to worry about any distortion. We use it for tailoring and garment construction all the time. There we are, that looks really quite nice, and we'll do the same thing for the other side. Once we've done that, we'll have this complete, just like this, and we're ready to put the flower pot rim on the top. Once you've sewn the flower pot background to the flower pot itself and press the seam allowances open, then you're ready to attach the flower pot rim. We'll take that, and what we're going to do is we're going to place it faces together, right sides together. We're going to sew across the top. Now our seam allowance is 1/4 inch, but we're going to sew this twice. So the first time you sew it a scant 1/4 inch or a fat 1/8 the first time. Once you've done that, then you're going to take it, so right like that. We're going to do what we call a burrito roll. We're going to do it the same way we do a yoke in a shirt. We're going to roll up the body of the piece we want to get sandwiched. We're going to take the rim, fold it over the top so you'll see the seam allowance there, and then we're going to turn it over. And we're just going to wrap it over to capture it like this. So let me try that one more time just to show you. Again, we've sewn it across the top. We're going to lift that out of our way, flower pot rim, so the face is up. We're going to roll the flower pot up pretty tight. Now don't get too close to this edge here. I'm going to leave it about right there. We're going to put this over the top. We're going to flip it over, and then we're going to bring the bottom of the rim, or the raw edge of it, to the other raw edges that have been sewn, just like that. And then we'll sew it now at a 1/4 inch. You'll see, once you've done that, you'll have 2 rows of stitching. Your first row, which is a little closer to the edge, and then your second row, which is a 1/4 inch away. You'll see it on the back side with 1 row. Now we're going to go ahead and turn this face out, and this takes a little bit of work. It's not hard, but you want to be careful with it. So I've got some hemostats here with some nice grip, and I'm just going to grab that edge. Now here it's going to buckle up a little bit. Don't be surprised by that. And it's going to fight you when it's turning. So we're just going to do that, and as soon as this flips over on itself right there, then you're ready to take the rest. And don't be afraid to be a little bit aggressive with it, but you don't want to rip your fabric, or your stitches of course. There we go, so it's turned over. Now we can just go ahead and keep pulling it out. It's one of those little forceps come in handy. There we are. If you use these, make sure you grab a chunk of fabric because you don't want to rip the fabric. They work really nicely, but if you just capture a little bit of it, you'll risk ripping them. There we go. It's turned face out. Now we're ready to give it a nice press. What I like to do is I like to press it from the back first. So I'm going to press here and press up that section. Once I've done that, turn it to the face and press that, and then finish the roll at the top. So again, when you're pressing it, make certain you press here, but don't press the crease just yet. Turn it over, finish your pressing here, and then go ahead and finish the crease. Once you're done, you're going to go ahead and sew them together. Our seam allowance is 1/2 inch. We want to just bring those together here on the back, And we're going to start about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. We're going to back up, and then we're going to come down. When we get to the end, we're going to back up and take it off the machine. Then we're ready to press it open, and the final step is we want to go and turn these tabs down. We want to kind of fix those dog ears. So later on when we get ready to assemble this and attach these serving as the pocket, those raw edges won't show. When you're complete, you'll have 2 rows of 3 pots that look like this from the back side. So they've been turned down. This is what they look like from the front side. And if you worked on the apron or you worked on the wall hanging, we had the same effect. It's going to be arced, but what we want to do is when we get ready to place this, we're going to lift this up ever so slightly, and this portion ever so slightly too, so that the pockets themselves get a sense of a bellow. They'll be open when it's complete. Once you've sewn your pockets together for the side panels, we'll go ahead and attach them to the sides of the bag. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment here. We'll do it for the ends as well. When we're finished, we'll have 3 pockets either side and 2 pockets on the ends for a total of 8 exterior pockets. It's quite simple. You're simply going to retrieve your end pieces, and we want to align the raw edges. Go ahead and pin those together here. And I like these little micro mini clips. Make for quick work. What we're going to do is once we pin it in place, we're going to go ahead and baste close to the edges. And our seam allowance is 1/2 of an inch when we get ready to construct this. So anything outside of that is quite fine. I typically, myself, stay about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And see, by virtue of the way the pattern's been formed, it creates this little bellows at the top to leave the pocket open. We'll sew from here, across the bottom, and across the other side. And then this is ready for the next step. We'll do the same thing for the side panels. We're going to start with the edges. We're going to make certain those raw edges align. And I like to get this end over here. And then at the intersections, make certain the bottoms align nicely, and then the intersections of the pockets. Now that we've done that, we want to make certain these lines here are perpendicular to this edge. And so I'm just going to eyeball that myself here. If you're not comfortable with that, you can certainly measure the distance and make certain it's correct. And I'm going to pin right here at the top to anchor right between the pockets. And remember, we dog-eared these corners up here, so later on when we sew it, you won't see raw edges. Again, perpendicular to the edge, pin, and we're ready to connect this to this backing of the side. We're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge here. We're going to pivot at 1/8 of an inch, stop where the seam allowance is or where the sewing line is. We're going to pivot, come back up, across the top, come down 1/8 of an inch on the other side, and keep in that same fashion until we have completed the bag. When you're done, it will look like this, and the pockets will be attached. Once you've completed sewing the pockets to the backings, then go ahead and clean finish the edges. I used my overlock for that so it gives it a nice professional finish. Once all our clean finishing is done, we're going to take them and turn them over. I use a friction pen for this, and what I want to do is I want to mark the intersection of the 1/2 inch seam allowance at both sides of the bottom. On the side panels, as I've done, right here and right there, here and here, and also on the end panels. We're going to end up sewing to this point and stopping. And then we're going to do the same thing for the bottom panel. This is the bottom of the bag. Again, you're simply going to mark a 1/2 inch up from the edge and 1/2 inch in to show the intersection of the seam allowance. And the seam allowance is a 1/2 of an inch where the seam allowances come together. On the bottom of the bag, we're also going to create a sleeve to hide the hard piece that we put in there to create support for the bottom. So on either end, what we want to do is place a mark 3/4 of an inch away from the edge. on both ends, and then we'll press over on that and we'll stitch it in place. And again, I like to use these friction pens because with the heat of the iron they disappear. You do want to always be a little bit cautious when you're using these kinds of pens, because sometimes they can leave marks on fabric, so always test your fabric. But in this case, they work quite nicely. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over, and we're going to stitch in place, and then we're ready for the next step. Once you've completed the liner for the bottom of the bag, we're ready for construction. What we're going to do is we're going to place the bottom of the bag face down, so face together with the side of the bag, aligning the bottoms. We do the same thing with the liner, face up in this case. And this is going to align right there, just centered on the edge here, with a 1/4 inch of excess sitting on either side, so you can see the bottom for a 1/4 inch. That's going to allow us to place the bottom bag hardener in there. We're going to go ahead and clip that in place, and then we're going to sew at 1/2 inch of our seam allowance. And we're going to sew from the intersection over here to the intersection here. We don't want to sew beyond that point. We want to make sure we sew right to it and not beyond. So again, we'll sew from here to here, and then we'll be ready for the next step. We've sewn the bottom and the sleeve into place, and again, the sleeve is going to be inside of the bottom, 1/4 inch away from the sewing edges. Let's see that we stopped and started right at the points here. What's going to happen eventually, this is going to come down and to the inside like that, and then this sleeve is going to cover, and by the way that we've sewn it, we're going to have all those raw edges encased right there. Okay. Now we need to do the other side. So what we're going to do is we're going to just pull that sleeve out of our way. We're going to slip everything over. Take the other long side and place it face down, aligning with the bottom. And we'll go ahead and clip that in place. So a little burrito roll thing that we did a little earlier when we were doing the pockets, we're going to do in this case as well. What we're going to want to do is we want to capture this over here eventually so that it wraps over and covers this edge. In order to do that successfully, the way we want to manage it is simply to roll all this fabric out of our way. So leave the sleeve alone. We're going to roll this to the inside toward the bottom, right? We're going to roll this to the inside as well. We're going to bring the sleeve over the top then, just like that. And again, it's going to align 1/4 inch in from our marked edge here, and we're going to pin all 3 layers together. And I'm using those micro clips for my purposes here. Do that, and we'll align it here at center, and then we'll align here at the end. Again, 1/4 inch away from the end here, where the sewing is going to conclude. We're going to sew through all layers, 1/2 inch away from the edge, starting and stopping at the intersections of the seam allowances precisely, and then we're going to pull it all the way through, and then our raw edges will all be encapsulated. We've sewn both sides, we're just simply going to pull it through the one end. There we are, our bottom complete, and we have our sleeve in place. Now we're ready to go ahead and sew the ends of the bag in place as well. We'll go ahead and give this a nice press. Once you turn the bag face out after sewing the sleeve into place, go ahead and give it a nice press right along the edges here and here. And if you're using the heat erase pen that I've been using, you'll have to remark here. So make sure you remark these indicators right here so that we know exactly where our intersections of our 1/2 inch seam allowances are. We're going to go ahead and place our side pockets in place now. We've got indicators right here as well. We're going to place this face up, and we're going to place our side bag piece face down, aligning the top edge. I'm going to go ahead and put that in place. And I'm not going to pin right at the intersection, I'm going to pin just above it. And then I'm going to bring this edge over to this edge. Again, align the top edge, and then we'll align the bottom, making certain that our notches line up precisely. What we're going to do then is we're going to sew from here all the way from the top to the intersection, and we'll stop. We'll sew the other side from the top down to the intersection, we'll stop, and then finally we'll sew it across the bottom to complete that edge from intersection to intersection. And then that side of the bag is done, and then we'll complete it on the other side. Now that we've sewn the sides down to the notch, the intersection right there on both sides, we're ready to complete the bottom. And the reason we sew only to the 1/2 inch point here is so that we can turn this corner so this opens up. It's a little awkward, but it's not hard. We're just going to align those edges. You can see how precisely that just lays right in there. And then we're going to sew, you can sew all the way from the edge or from the intersection, but we're going to sew it 1/2 inch here to close up that side. And then that will complete this one side of the bag, and then we're ready to do exactly the same on the other side. So once we've sewn the sides, we're going to go ahead and turn it face out, and then we're going to give a nice press, and we'll pull out our corners so that they look nice and tidy. You'll see we have that sleeve area right here, so it'll be able to slide in there, and it'll give us a nicer, firmer bottom on the bag. And now we're ready to go ahead and finish the top and place our handles. So what we'll do is go ahead and mark, and you can use your friction pen for that, and a ruler, and we want to mark it 3/4 inch away from the edge. An alternate method is to go ahead and take this, and this little device by Clover, it's not heat sensitive, and I can just turn it over and align my 3/4 inch mark and press right there. It's a really clever device that works really fast for that. So we want to turn that over at 3/4 inch, and then we're ready for the handles. To create my handle straps for the bag, I'm going to cut them 2 inches wide, and I'm going to sew them at 1/4 inch in depth. That's going to give me a 3/4 inch finish, but the depth of them and the length of them is simply a matter of preference. For my purposes, I cut them at 20 inches long, 2 inches wide. That'll give me a 3/4 inch finish. I'm going to bring them faces together, right sides together. I'm going to sew them at 1/4 inch away from the edge. And then I want to turn them face out, but before I do that, I want to press the seam allowance open. It'll give us a nicer finish when we do that. And I want to avoid pressing the edges if I can help it. So that's where the little iron comes in quite handy, so I can get right in there, give myself a nice press without also pressing the edges. Once we have it pressed, we'll go ahead and turn it face out. And I use what's called a fast turn tube turner. I've had mine for almost 30 years, and I would be lost without it. It turns spaghetti straps, everything that I need to turn face out really quickly and easily. So it looks like this. There's several different sizes of tubes. We're going to place the tube inside, and then we're going to inchworm our fabric onto it. And then there's a little wire with a pigtail on the end. We're going to place that inside. And we're going to capture the end of with a pigtail. And sometimes it's a good choice to go through a couple of times. I'm going to try once here and see if we catch it the first time. And then we're going to bring that through, and just like that. It makes very quick work of turning tubes. And by virtue of turning that seam allowance flat, now I can press this seam allowance flat and open on the center of this, and it'll give us a nice finish when we're ready for the next step. Now that our straps are prepared, we're going to identify where we want them placed. I went ahead and made marks right between my flower pot pockets. So right in the center, there and there, on both sides, and made certain they were symmetrical front to back. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to open this up. I'm just going to place this inside right there, aligning it with my mark. And I'm just going to sew close to the edge just to anchor it. What's going to happen eventually is this is going to sew there, and then this is all going to roll over, and the handle is going to roll up. And then we'll go ahead and finish our hem all the way around the top, and then we'll box the strap right there with a stitch to really stabilize it. So it's captured again in the hem line of the top, just like that. We'll sew it in place first, then we'll fold it up, we'll sew the whole hem, and then we come back and box that area. Now that our handle's been sewn and boxed, we're ready to go ahead and put the bag bottom in. And all you're going to do is you're going to cut a piece of plastic that is 1/4 inch narrower and 1/4 inch shorter than the bag bottom. You're just going to open up one side and just slide it right into that sleeve area, and it will be hidden and captured right there. You'll pop this back up, and your bag will be complete. And there you have it.